scrolling for a second, because what just happened in Iran could change the Middle East faster than anyone expected. For months, the world has been watching missiles, explosions and military threats. But the biggest development this week did not happen on a battlefield. It happened behind closed doors inside Doha, where American and Iranian officials quietly returned to the negotiating table. At first glance, it looked like another routine diplomatic meeting. It was not, because after months of conflict, both sides agreed to keep the talks alive. That single decision may end up being more important than any airstrike we have seen in recent weeks. Welcome back to Emily Carter. If this is your first time here, subscribe now, because we break down the biggest global stories with facts, context and simple explanations, not clickbait. Now let me ask you one question. Why would two governments that were accusing each other just days ago suddenly continue negotiating instead of walking away? The answer has almost nothing to do with trust. It has everything to do with pressure. Iran is under enormous economic pressure. The United States wants to avoid another regional crisis. Global oil markets remain sensitive. Shipping companies are watching every movement in the Strait of Hormuz. And governments across the world know that one wrong decision could affect energy prices, financial markets, and regional stability almost overnight. That is why this meeting matters. According to official statements released after the talks, both sides described the discussions as positive enough to continue. There was no dramatic handshake, no final peace agreement, no victory speech. But there was something far more important. Neither side walked away. In diplomacy, that is often the first sign that both governments still believe a deal is possible. And this is where the story becomes much bigger than the headlines. Most people think this conflict is only about military power. It is not. Behind every public statement, there is another battle taking place. A battle over sanctions, oil exports, international trade, nuclear inspections, regional influence, and billions of dollars tied to the future of Iran's economy. That is the real reason these negotiations are receiving so much attention. Because if the talks succeed, they could reshape the balance of power across the Middle East. If they fail, the region could once again move toward a dangerous period of uncertainty. The next few weeks may decide which direction this story takes. To understand why these negotiations suddenly matter, we have to look beyond the headlines. For months, the relationship between Washington and Tehran has been defined by pressure. Military operations, economic sanctions, political threats, and regional tensions pushed both countries further apart. Every new headline made it look as if diplomacy was finished. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. Officials from both sides continued communicating through mediators. They were not sitting across the same table, but messages were still moving back and forth. That may sound like a small detail, yet in international diplomacy, it is often the difference between a crisis getting worse and a crisis slowly moving toward a solution. So why now? The biggest reason is economics. Iran's economy has been under severe pressure for years, but recent events have made the situation even more difficult. Inflation remains extremely high, the national currency has weakened, and the cost of everyday essentials continues to rise. For millions of ordinary Iranians, this is no longer just a political issue. It affects daily life every single day. At the same time, the United States also has reasons to avoid another prolonged regional conflict. Every new escalation creates uncertainty in global oil markets, increases shipping costs, and adds pressure to the world economy. That means both governments are facing different problems, but they share one common interest. Neither side wants the situation to spiral out of control. This is exactly why the Doha talks attracted so much attention from diplomats and intelligence analysts around the world. According to officials, the discussions were constructive enough for both sides to agree on another round of negotiations. No final agreement has been announced, but keeping the dialogue alive is an important signal. Because once governments completely stop talking, the chances of misunderstanding become much higher. History has shown that many international crises became worse simply because communication broke down. Right now, that has not happened. Instead, both sides appear willing to test whether diplomacy can still produce results. And that tells us something very important. The real battle may no longer be taking place only through military pressure. It may now be shifting toward negotiations where every decision behind closed doors could have consequences far beyond Iran itself. But there is one issue that could decide whether these negotiations succeed or collapse: the nuclear program. For years, it has been the biggest source of tension between Iran and the West. The United States and its allies want stronger international inspections to verify Iran's nuclear activities. Iran, on the other hand, insists that its nuclear program is peaceful and says any future inspections must respect its national sovereignty. That disagreement remains one of the hardest problems to solve. According to officials, nuclear discussions are expected to become a major focus in the next phase of negotiations. And this is where things become even more complicated. International inspectors want access to key nuclear facilities so they can independently verify what is happening on the ground. Without that access, governments are forced to rely on satellite imagery, intelligence reports and public statements, none of which can answer every question with complete certainty. That uncertainty creates risk. When governments are unsure about what the other side is doing, they usually prepare for the worst possible scenario. That is why verification matters so much. At the same time, Iran argues that trust must work both ways. Its leaders believe sanctions, relief and economic recovery should move forward alongside any new commitments. So both sides are asking for guarantees before making major concessions. That is why progress has been slow. Every proposal creates another question. Every answer leads to another negotiation. Despite these challenges, one fact stands out: neither side has ended the talks. That tells us they still believe diplomacy offers a better path than another round of escalation. And that matters far beyond Iran. If negotiations eventually produce even a limited agreement, it could reduce tensions across the Middle East, improve confidence in global energy markets, and lower the risk of another major regional crisis. But if these talks fail, uncertainty could return very quickly. For now, the outcome remains uncertain. What is clear is that the next round of negotiations may be one of the most important diplomatic meetings of the year, not because a final deal is guaranteed, but because both sides still see enough value to keep talking. There is another reason why these talks have captured so much global attention. The stakes are no longer limited to Iran and the United States. Every major economy is watching what happens next. The Middle East remains one of the world's most important energy regions, and even small changes in stability can affect oil prices, shipping costs, and global financial markets. That is why investors, governments, and businesses are paying close attention to every update coming out of Doha. If negotiations continue making progress, markets are likely to become more stable. If they break down, uncertainty could return almost immediately. But there is another challenge that receives far less attention: trust. After years of sanctions, military tension and political disagreements, neither side fully trusts the other. That means every promise must be verified, every commitment must be checked, and every step forward depends on both governments believing the other side will honour its word. This is exactly why diplomacy moves so slowly. It is not because officials cannot meet. It is because every single sentence in a potential agreement could have major political and security consequences. One misunderstanding could erase months of progress. At the same time, regional countries are also watching carefully. Many governments want stability because another major conflict would damage trade, investment, and long-term economic growth across the region. That creates additional pressure on everyone involved to keep negotiations alive. For now, the talks remain fragile. There is still no final agreement. There is still no guarantee of success. But compared with only a few weeks ago, one thing has clearly changed. Both sides are talking more than they are threatening. And in international diplomacy, that is often the first step towards something much bigger than the public can see. So where does all of this leave us today? The honest answer is that nobody knows exactly how these negotiations will end. There are only two realistic possibilities. The first is that both sides continue talking, reach a limited agreement, and slowly reduce tensions over the coming months. The second is that negotiations stall, disagreements return, and the region once again faces the risk of another dangerous escalation. Right now, Both outcomes remain possible, but one thing is already clear. Neither Washington nor Tehran wants to make a decision that could trigger another costly conflict without first exhausting every diplomatic option. That alone tells us how serious the situation has become. The next few weeks could shape not only the future relationship between the United States and Iran, but also the future of energy markets, regional security, and global diplomacy. Sometimes history changes because of a single battle. Other times it changes because two rivals choose to keep talking instead of walking away. This may be one of those moments. The headlines may focus on missiles and military threats, but the real story is unfolding inside meeting rooms where every conversation could influence the next chapter of the Middle East. And until a final agreement is reached or the negotiations completely break down, the world will continue watching every move very closely. Before you leave, remember this. The biggest geopolitical stories rarely begin with explosions. They begin with conversations that most people never see. Right now, the future of these negotiations remains uncertain. A breakthrough is possible. Another setback is also possible. Until both sides reach a final agreement, every meeting, every statement, and every diplomatic move will matter. One decision could reshape the future of Iran, influence the Middle East, and affect the global economy far beyond this region. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to Emily Carter and turn on notifications, because we bring you the biggest global stories with facts, context, and clear analysis. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.